Edinburgh in 1828 was a city divided. By day, it thrived, a beacon of the Scottish Enlightenment, where science and progress flourished. But by night, it was a city of shadows. The fog rolled in thick from the Firth of Forth, wrapping its ancient stone buildings in a suffocating cloak of mystery. Beneath this veil, a darker side of Edinburgh emerged, a world of poverty, disease, and desperation. And amid this desperate world, two men, William Burke and William Hare, would find a sinister opportunity to profit. Burke and Hare were not born killers. They were men of circumstance driven by greed and the cruel realities of a society that turned a blind eye to the poor. But in the shadows of Edinburgh's narrow alleyways, their descent into murder would unfold. It began with a death. An old man, one of the many poor souls lodging at William Hare's boarding house, died of natural causes. His passing should have been uneventful, yet to Hare and Burke, it presented an unexpected opportunity. In those days, the demand for fresh cadavers was at an all-time high. Edinburgh was home to one of the world's leading medical schools, where anatomists needed bodies for dissection. But the legal supply of bodies couldn't keep up with the demand, and grave robbing, known as resurrectionism, had become a lucrative trade. When Hare mentioned the idea of selling the dead man's body to Burke, it was a casual suggestion, almost a joke. But soon it became clear. There was money to be made and no one would suspect a thing. Burke and Hare wasted no time. Wrapping the old man's body in a sack, they transported it through the misty streets to the office of Dr. Robert Knox, a renowned anatomist at Surgeon Square. Dr. Knox was known for his lectures, where he would dissect human bodies before eager students. He rarely asked where the bodies came from, as long as they were fresh and intact. When Burke and Hare arrived with their grim cargo, Knox greeted them with little more than a raised eyebrow. The transaction was cold, businesslike. He handed them several pounds, more money than they had seen in weeks. As they left Surgeon Square, the clink of coins in their pockets drowned out whatever moral hesitation they might have felt. The success of their first sale was intoxicating, and it didn't take long for Burke and Hare to realize they didn't need to wait for natural deaths. There were plenty of people in Edinburgh who lived on the fringes of society. People who wouldn't be missed. Beggars, drifters, the sick and the elderly. The city was full of them. Their first victim was Abigail Simpson, an elderly woman known for selling salt in the local market. She was lonely, easy to manipulate. Burke and Hare invited her back to the boarding house with the promise of warmth and whiskey. Once she was drunk, they suffocated her. The method they used, smothering their victims, was cold and calculated. It left no marks, and the bodies were still perfect for dissection. Over the next several months, Burke and Hare descended further into depravity. They perfected their method, preying on the city's most vulnerable. Men, women, even children fell victim to their greed. The bodies piled up, each one sold to Dr. Knox with the same lack of questions, the same cold exchange of money. At first, they felt invincible. Each murder became easier, each victim nothing more than a means to an end. But the city was beginning to notice. Neighbors whispered about people disappearing, about the strange comings and goings from Hare's boarding house. And still, Dr. Knox asked no questions. His lectures were growing in popularity, and Burke and Hare's grisly business continued to flourish. Burke and Hare's downfall came not from guilt or remorse, but from arrogance. They had become too comfortable, too careless. Their final victim was Mary Doherty, a woman whose disappearance would unravel their entire operation. She had come to the boarding house seeking shelter, just like so many others before her. But this time, something went wrong. Neighbors overheard the struggle. Suspicious of the strange noises, they alerted the authorities. When the police arrived, they found Doherty's body stuffed under a bed, still warm. Burke and Hare had no time to cover their tracks. The game was up. Faced with the gallows, Hare made a desperate choice. He turned on Burke, offering a full confession in exchange for immunity. Burke was left to face the full force of the law. His trial was swift, and the verdict inevitable: death by hanging. On the day of his execution, thousands gathered in the streets, eager to witness the death of a murderer. But even in death, Burke's story didn't end. In a dark twist of fate, his body was handed over for dissection, just as his victims had been. Dr. Knox escaped justice, but his reputation was forever tainted. The story of Burke and Hare continues to haunt the streets of Edinburgh. Their names are whispered in the dark corners of the city and the places where they once prowled are said to be cursed. Surgeon Square, where Dr. Knox once dissected their victims, has become a symbol of the thin line between science and morality. Even today, visitors claim to see ghostly figures wandering through the fog, hear faint whispers on the wind. Burke and Hare may be gone, but their legacy remains, a chilling reminder of how greed can turn men into monsters. In the early 18th century, nestled deep within the dense, ancient forests of eastern Serbia, lay the remote village of Kisiljevo. Surrounded by towering oaks and enshrouded in perpetual mist, Kisiljevo was a place where folklore and reality intertwined. The villagers lived simple lives bound by tradition and the cycles of the land. Yet beneath the surface of daily routines, an undercurrent of superstition flowed, a belief that unseen forces lurked in the shadows, watching and waiting. Among Kisiljevo's inhabitants was Petar Blagojevic, a man known for his stoic demeanor and piercing gaze. He lived on the outskirts of the village with his wife and son, tending to his modest farm. Though not unfriendly, Petar was reserved, often keeping to himself. Some whispered that he was hiding secrets, that his silence concealed more than mere shyness. Children spoke of seeing him wandering the woods at odd hours, disappearing into the fog as if swallowed by the forest itself. One evening, without warning, Petar fell gravely ill. His robust frame weakened rapidly, and his skin grew ashen. The village healer was baffled. No remedy or prayer could halt his decline. As he lay on his deathbed, Petar's eyes burned with an intensity that unsettled those around him. He grasped his wife's hand with surprising strength, whispering incoherent words before releasing his final breath. The villagers mourned, but a sense of unease lingered, an unshakable feeling that this was not the end. The funeral was a subdued affair. Rain drizzled from a leaden sky as Petar was laid to rest in the village cemetery. The priest recited the rites, but his words seemed swallowed by the damp air. As the coffin was lowered, a sudden gust extinguished the candles, and a low murmur swept through the crowd. Some claimed they heard a distant sigh, a final protest from the departed. Superstition tightened its grip on the villagers' hearts. Barely a week had passed when tragedy struck again. Milos, a strong and healthy farmer, fell ill overnight. He spoke of terrible dreams where Petar visited him, pressing upon his chest, stealing his breath. Within 24 hours, Milos was dead. Panic began to ripple through Kisiljevo as whispers of the unnatural spread like wildfire. The deaths continued, 9 in total, all sudden, all unexplained. Each victim recounted the same haunting visitation from Petar Blagojevic. Fear tightened its grip on the village. Families barricaded their homes at night, and the once lively streets grew silent. The air was thick with dread, and the boundaries between the living and the dead seemed to blur. Petar's widow, Anna, became a recluse, her grief overshadowed by terror. One stormy night, a knock echoed through her small home. Trembling, she opened the door to find Petar standing before her, eyes hollow and voice cold. He demanded his shoes, speaking as if nothing had changed. Paralyzed by fear, Anna watched as he turned and disappeared into the storm. By morning, she had vanished, leaving behind only a cryptic note warning of the darkness that had taken hold. Desperation drove the villagers to seek help beyond their borders. They petitioned the local imperial authorities, pleading for intervention. The fear of a supernatural predator was met with skepticism, but the reports were too numerous to ignore. An official named Frumbald was dispatched to Kisiljevo, accompanied by a small contingent of soldiers. Frumbald arrived to find a village suffocated by terror. He interviewed the villagers, each account more disturbing than the last. Though a man of reason, the palpable fear and consistency of the stories unsettled him. The line between myth and reality blurred, forcing him to confront possibilities he had long dismissed. Bound by duty but driven by curiosity, Frumbald agreed to the exhumation of Petar's body. The priest protested, citing the sanctity of the grave, but the villagers insisted. With imperial authority granting permission, preparations were made to face whatever truth lay beneath the soil. At dawn, they gathered in the cemetery, tools in hand. The air was thick with anticipation and dread. As shovels bit into the earth, a hush fell over the crowd. When the coffin was pried open, gasps and cries erupted. Petter's body appeared untouched by death. His skin was flush, his eyes closed as if in peaceful sleep, and fresh blood stained his lips. Even his nails and hair seemed to have grown, a sight both miraculous and horrifying. Frumbald documented the phenomenon meticulously, his hands shaking as he wrote. The villagers demanded action. They knew what had to be done according to ancient customs. Reluctantly, Frumbald consented, allowing them to proceed under his watchful eye. The weight of their collective fear pressed upon them as they prepared for the grim task ahead. With solemn determination, they drove a wooden stake through Petter's heart. As the stake pierced flesh, a gush of fresh blood flowed, and an otherworldly groan seemed to emanate from the corpse. Some villagers stumbled back, crossing themselves, while others stood firm, eyes wide with a mix of fear and vindication. To ensure the evil was purged, they removed the body and built a pyre at the edge of the village. Flames roared to life, consuming the remains amidst crackling wood and swirling smoke. The villagers watched silently, the fiery glow reflecting in their eyes. As the ashes scattered to the wind, a collective exhale signaled the lifting of a heavy burden. In the days that followed, the mysterious death ceased. An uneasy peace settled over Kisilyevo. The villagers returned to their routines, but the shadow of recent events lingered. Children were warned to stay close to home, and nightly prayers took on a new fervor. The story of Peter Blagojevich became a cautionary tale, a dark thread woven into the fabric of their collective memory. Frumbald returned to his superiors with a detailed account of the events. His report, initially met with skepticism, eventually found its way into broader circulation. Scholars and officials debated its contents, and the tale spread beyond Serbia's borders. The story of Petar Blagojevich ignited curiosity and fear, contributing to the burgeoning fascination with vampirism across Europe. As the story spread, it evolved, merging with local myths and legends. The figure of the vampire emerged from the shadows, taking shape in the collective consciousness. Tales of the undead, cursed to walk the earth feeding on the living, captivated and terrified audiences. Petar Blagojevich's story became a cornerstone in vampire folklore, echoing through time. Centuries later, Kisilyevo remains a quiet village, its dark chapter a distant memory, yet still whispered among locals. Visitors occasionally come, drawn by the eerie tale. Some claim that on certain nights, when the veil between worlds thins, a shadowy figure can be seen wandering the old cemetery, a reminder that some stories never truly end. The haunting tale of Petar Blagojevich serves as a chilling reminder of the power of fear and the mysteries that linger at the edge of understanding. Whether viewed as a cautionary tale, a piece of folklore, or a historical account, it continues to captivate and unsettle. Perhaps it is because, deep down, we recognize that the line between myth and reality is thinner than we'd like to admit. If this journey into the shadows has captivated you, don't let the story end here. Like, share, and subscribe to delve deeper into the mysteries that history has left behind. Join us as we explore the tales that blur the lines between myth and reality. Until next time, keep your doors locked and your candles lit,